Caution, this video is little bit scarier, and every video on this channel are true stories or they are based on true stories. By clicking the subscribe button, please.
Have you ever wondered what happens when science goes too far? When the pursuit of power ignores the very essence of humanity? Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling legends to ever emerge from the shadows of history. A story that blurs the line between fact and fiction, sanity and madness. This is the tale of the Russian sleep experiment. The year is 1947. World War II has ended, but the Cold War is just beginning. In a secret Soviet facility, a team of researchers receives a chilling directive: create a soldier who doesn't need to sleep. The objective? To keep a unit awake and operational for 15 consecutive days. The method? An experimental stimulant gas, a volatile chemical cocktail designed to suppress the body's need for rest. To test this gas, they needed subjects, not volunteers, but prisoners. 5 political dissidents, deemed enemies of the state, were selected. They were locked inside a sealed, airtight chamber, monitored by microphones and a thick, one-way glass porthole. They were given books, cots, running water, and enough dried food to last a month. The deal was simple, but cruel. Survive for 15 days without sleep, and you walk free. A promise of freedom dangled before them, a small light in an otherwise inescapable darkness. Little did they know, they were walking into a nightmare from which there would be no escape. The gas was released, the timer started, and the world held its breath. For the first few days, everything seemed almost normal. The 5 men, knowing they were being watched, conversed with each other. They spoke of their pasts, their families, their hopes for the freedom they were promised. There was a sense of camaraderie, a shared struggle. But as the hours bled into days, the stimulant gas began to work its dark magic. The conversations grew strained, darker. They began recounting traumatic memories, dredging up the worst moments of their lives. The easy chatter of day 1 had vanished, replaced by a somber, paranoid tone. By day 5, a chilling transformation had taken place. They stopped talking to each other entirely. Instead, they began to whisper, their voices raspy and conspiratorial. But they weren't whispering to one another. They were whispering to the microphones, convinced they could win the trust of their captors by betraying their fellow prisoners. Each man seemed to believe that the others were the enemy, that only he could be trusted. Paranoia had sunk its teeth in deep, turning them against each other in a psychological war zone. The researchers, watching from the other side of the glass, noted this with cold, clinical detachment. The experiment was proceeding, but the human cost was already becoming terrifyingly clear. Then came day 9. The descent into madness accelerated. One of the subjects snapped. He began to scream, not just a cry of pain, but a raw, primal, continuous roar that echoed through the chamber for 3 hours straight. He screamed until his vocal cords tore, reducing his voice to nothing but a pathetic, squeaking whimper. Even after he could no longer make a sound, his mouth remained open, as if still trying to release the agony trapped inside him. The others didn't react. They continued whispering to the microphones until a second prisoner started screaming. The remaining calmly took the books from the shelves, tore out the pages one by one, and began a horrifying ritual. They defecated on the pages and calmly, methodically, plastered them over the one-way glass porthole. The observation window was now completely blocked. And then, the screaming stopped. And so did the whispering. The chamber fell silent. For 3 long days, there was nothing, no sound. The researchers checked the microphones. They were working. They checked the oxygen levels. They were normal, consistent with 5 men breathing, but barely moving. The silence was more unnerving than the screaming had ever been. Were they dead? Had they finally succumbed? The researchers were torn. According to their protocol, they were not to open the chamber under any circumstances. But the silence was deafening, and the fear of failure gnawed at them. On the morning of day 14, they made a decision. They would break protocol. Using the intercom system, they announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you his immediate freedom." They hoped the promise of freedom would elicit a response, any response. A single, calm voice replied through the speaker, a voice that sent a shiver down their spines. It said, simply, "We no longer want to be freed. Panic set in among the research team. A debate raged. What should they do? Finally, at midnight on the 15th day, the lead scientist gave the order. The stimulant gas was flushed from the chamber and replaced with fresh air. The researchers braced themselves, soldiers standing ready. They unlocked the door, expecting to find 5 corpses. But what they found was far worse. Only 4 of the 5 subjects were alive. The food rations had barely been touched. In the center of the room lay the remains of the 5th subject. Pieces of his flesh had been torn from his body and stuffed into the floor drain, blocking it and causing several inches of bloody water to pool on the floor. The 4 surviving subjects had also committed horrific acts of self-mutilation. It was a scene from a slaughterhouse. Their skin was ripped, their muscles and tendons exposed. Abdominal organs were visible through gaping wounds in their torsos. And yet, they were not just alive. They were ferociously, terrifyingly active. When the soldiers tried to remove the subjects, a violent struggle ensued. The prisoners fought with a strength that seemed inhuman. They resisted the sedatives, their bodies metabolizing the drugs at an impossible rate. One soldier died after a subject tore out his throat with his bare hands. Another was severely injured. In the chaos, one of the subjects ruptured his spleen and bled out. As he died, he was heard to gasp, "So, nearly free." The remaining 3 were restrained and moved to a medical facility. The lead researcher, desperate for answers, demanded to know what had happened. What had they become? One of the subjects, strapped to a gurney as doctors tried to replace his organs, simply smiled. His eyes, wide and unblinking, held a terrifying lucidity. The surgeon hesitated, noting that the man's body seemed to be rejecting the anesthetic. "Just keep cutting," the subject rasped, his smile widening. The most vocal of the 3 was strapped down, a soldier holding him in place. The lead researcher pulled up a chair. "What are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The subject turned his head, his eyes locking onto the researchers. A slow, chilling smile spread across his mutilated face. "Have you forgotten so easily?" he whispered. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher stared, frozen in horror. The experiment was an abomination. He drew his pistol and shot the prisoner between the eyes. He then turned to the last remaining subject, a man who had been mute since the chamber was open. "What are you?" the researcher demanded, aiming the gun. "I must know." The prisoner looked up, and for the first time spoke. So close to consciousness. The researcher didn't hesitate. He fired again. The official story is that the experiment was immediately terminated. The surviving medical staff were silenced, and all records were classified, buried deep within the Soviet archives, never to be seen again. The event was erased from history, a ghost story whispered among intelligence communities. But legends have a way of surviving. Years later, a file allegedly surfaced on the internet, a single folder containing details of the protocol. It's been dismissed as a work of fiction, a creepypasta designed to scare and entertain. But the story's power lies in its plausibility. It preys on our fears of unchecked power, of scientific ambition gone awry, and of the darkness that might lie dormant within the human psyche. Is it real? Almost certainly not. But in the dead of night, when you can't sleep, you might find yourself wondering. Some versions of the tale claim that audio recordings from the chamber still exist, hidden away on the darkest corners of the web. And they say that if you find them, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the breathing. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the dark. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the unknown. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Russian sleep experiment. Until next time, stay curious.